Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Joel Elston here. It's Thursday, March 30th, 2017. And the last episode that we were live, we actually finished our long, ongoing exploration of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And Joel, it was an amazing exploration. It was so good that we figured, hey, let's do it again with another book. What do you think?
I really enjoyed Think and Grow Rich, and as you and I talked and we shared with our audience, it was such a great format. And until we get our live radio show, this is really probably the best way we can discuss the law of attraction and all that goes with it, because it gives us sort of a format that isn't necessarily dictated by us, but it gives us a chance to comment on other people's opinion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And the other thing that we realized is that when we focus chapter by chapter on a book, like we did with Napoleon Hill's book, it really makes us go deep into the subject in a way we probably would not have done with just our normal off-the-cuff conversations.
Exactly. And we were able to even throw in a critical eye to areas that, at least where we either disagreed or we didn't understand or didn't think it applied. And
or plainly we said, what the heck was he thinking?
Yeah, exactly. And I think often some of the law of attraction gurus, they do a great job. And,
sure.
And I have admiration for them all, but I don't think there's times when they address some of the stuff that some people find challenging.
Yes.
And anybody else recognize this, or why does anybody else have trouble understanding or appreciating that? And I think that's something we bring to the table, not in a negative sense,
no.
But I like to point out areas that hung me up in the law of attraction. I think that's helpful.
I agree entirely. The probably the biggest challenge with this whole what is it, a realm, a territory, the whole law of attraction thing. The biggest problem is that because it still hasn't completely taken over in the public consciousness, it has a very strong minority following. But among the majority of people, it's kind of one of those weird woo-woo things. Because of that, I think people tend to always want to put the positive spin on it, which makes sense. I mean, it's about positive thinking. But sometimes you have to also look at it from a critical viewpoint. And I think a key part of what is taught by Abraham Hicks explains that. You want to have the contrast of what you don't want so you can understand what you do want. Well, the only way you can have that contrast is if you actually take some time to look at the stuff you don't want and then shift your attention over. Something else you and I have been trying to do show after show.
Absolutely. And that becomes sort of the challenge for a lot of our people. And as we have move forward with Think and Grow Rich and we go into The Secret, I think we'll see more of that same type of thinking as well.
So without further ado, we are going to be looking at The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. This is the one that basically broke the entire topic wide open on a worldwide basis. And it is both in book form and in movie form. I don't know about you, Joel. I have both the book and the movie. Every once in a while, I like to get the DVD out and just play it for myself and remind myself of many of the good concepts that are in there. But either way you go, you're going to get the gist of it, because one is basically almost identical to the other.
It is. And as we do with a critical eye of giving our opinion, I find the DVD would really be much better if they would have literally put a period about 30 minutes before it ends. I think the DVD tends to be more redundant. At least it feels that way. It feels very repetitive. And maybe it is in the book. It just doesn't read that way to me. So again, that's something that I've also had that feedback from other people that will watch the DVD. And I'll tell people ahead of time, when you get to that last 30 minutes, you're not going to hear a lot new in the last 30 minutes. I encourage everyone to listen to it all, but I've listened to that probably 50 times or watched it 50 times, and now when I get toward the end, I will pretty much stop that. Now the book, as you know, I buy used copies of this book, and everyone I come in contact with just ends up with one of these books. In fact, if our audience, anybody in the audience wants a copy and can't afford one, you simply email us, and I'll make sure, and your mailing address, and I'll make sure you get one. Because it's the reason I do that, it's such an incredible tool. And for me, it was my opening experience, as with most people with the law of attraction.
Right.
It was their opening experience in that. And I will say that it is a very good entry-level sort of introduction into the law of attraction.
And by the way, if you want to take advantage of Joel's offer, his email, joel@loatoday.net, that'll get to him. He'll get in touch with you. But absolutely, you're right. It is most people's first introduction to the whole concept of the law of attraction. And by the way, I will say one thing in defense of the last 30 minutes of the DVD video. I actually liked the last 30 minutes. And you're right. It is very repetitive of what has been talked about already. Probably the one weakness of the entire thing, both book and movie, is that the concepts are presented in a very simplified form. And when you have concepts in a very simplified form that basically, they're basically saying the same thing over and over again, well, that's what you get. You get the same thing said over and over again. One of the things I like about what you and I do, Joel, is we don't keep it all simple. We get into the depths of it. We look at all the interweavings and the stuff that goes off in weird directions and all that kind of thing, which I think is more interesting. But the good thing that I like about the DVD at the end, the last 3 or 4 or 5 scenes, something like that, are really positive. Really, I mean, if you're in a bad place and you need to feel good, just watch those last 3, 4, 5 scenes, because it's one really positive message after another. Earlier in the book, you have to do some of the looking at the negative, what we talked about earlier, looking at what you don't want so you can understand what you want. But the last 3 or 4 scenes of the movie are just so reinforcing for anybody who needs to build confidence up. So that's what I would say is the positive side of the DVD.
That's a great point, Walt. That really is. So I'm glad that you bring that to the table. I didn't look at it that way, and because my mindset is what it is now, I certainly don't lack for a positive experience in a day.
No, I don't think so. You have plenty of them.
Yeah. So I guess that that's a point that is well taken, and I probably realized that back when I first started watching it as well.
Oh, sure.
And one of the things too that I will tell our audience that this isn't a negative, and I'm very much in favor of this. So I'm not saying it's negative. This was written, obviously to help people, but also to make some money. Right. Which she made quite a bit of money.
Oh, so $300 million, I believe.
Yeah, she did okay with it. So, with that being said, one of my, it's not even a criticism, but it is at least introduced in the beginning, like just the title, The Secret, almost like I'm going to unveil the secret that and again, and she, in the beginning, she talks about, and when she's giving her foreword, she speaks about, and I'll read a little bit of it because it is really good. She starts with, a year ago, my life had collapsed around me. I'd worked myself into exhaustion. My father died suddenly, and my relationship with my colleagues and loved ones was in turmoil. Little did I know at the time, out of my greatest despair was to become my greatest gift. And she goes on to the next.
By the way, that could come right out of your experience, because that's the one lesson you picked up very early on.
Exactly, and to me, that paragraph is what grabbed me, because again, when I was reading this, I was on the other side of my despair, but I had yet to put it all together, sort of how she did that for me right there. So that first paragraph of the foreword really hit home with me, and I'm like, and I actually can remember thinking, what if I could truly make my despair be my greatest gift? Because at that point, I viewed I had overcome my despair, but I certainly saw no positive in my despair at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And anybody, all of us have been in that place at one time or another, in some degree or another. And when you're there, that's really hard to see.
Yes.
Because all you can see is just how bad things are.
Right. And so the second paragraph says, after she said this, out of her greatest despair come her greatest gift, second paragraph goes on to say, I'd been given a glimpse of a great secret, the secret to life. The glimpse came in a 100-year-old book given to me by my daughter Haley. I began tracing the secret back through history. I couldn't believe all the people who knew this. They were the greatest. They were some of the greatest people in history. Plato, Shakespeare, Newton, Beethoven, Lincoln, Emerson, Edison, and Einstein.
That's a list right there. Oh.
That was and what I like about what she's doing, and you and I talked about this as well, that a lot of these great historical, I call heroes, a lot of them, members of our past, they were unintentionally using the secret. They didn't know they were doing it. They were, and they probably understood it, but never were able to quantify it or actually put it into words.
They certainly never called it the law of attraction, because that's a new term that did not exist even 25 years ago.
Right, and so that that she starts off by laying that out there, that she, why are these people? What are these people? Who are these people? Why are they different? How do they become these people? And she goes on to say that one by one, she began to understand the concepts as they unfolded to her. But here's the piece that I wanted to talk about what she says, and this is another one that you and I bantered around a lot. I became a magnet. As I began to search, one great living master after another was drawn to me. So she felt that, and I relate so much to this, as I started looking into the law of attraction, I was, and it was much easier for a lot of us now with Google, to be honest with you. It's you can be led to the next one pretty easily.
Oh yeah. But
there was a lot of discoveries that I was making that I had no idea were started by this. When I often will tell people now that the secret, for those that are old enough to remember this, our younger members of the audience have no clue what I'm talking about. But when the internet first came out, we all signed on by AOL.
Yeah, that's true.
And we thought the internet was AOL. and so AOL was a sort of a training wheels on a three-wheel bicycle almost to sort of get us through the internet, and you thought that was the internet. And in a way, the secret is sort of the AOL. It's a gateway. It's an opening. It exposes you to it, but it is really the tip of the iceberg.
That's right.
And giving her credit, she doesn't claim it's any more than that. She is revealing to people this message that is so shocking that even the little bit she reveals, it is so much more powerful than and I believe she believes it's even more powerful. But the idea that people hearing it could only about take in this much to begin with to give it any credibility.
And, of course, in this first chapter, this is where she reveals for the first time that the secret to life is the law of attraction, and what the law of attraction is. The various presenters in the program share their own ways of understanding it, and each one is a little bit different, but the same common theme happens over and over and over again. I think it was, I can't remember which presenter it was, who ultimately, either in this chapter or the next one, breaks it down into three pieces. Mike Dooley says it in terms of thoughts become things, but the way the secret presents it is it's a three-step process. First, you have to do you have that page there? I don't know if you have it in front of you. First, you have to think about what it is that you want. Then you have to believe that it's coming. And then third, you have to receive it. And right. I thought to myself, the first time I read that, okay, receive it from where?
Yes, receive it.
Where is that coming from?
Right, that was always part of, and again, in the very beginning, and I will tell you honestly, one of the things that really hit home for me, or I had immediately when she started talking about, as she gets further into the book, she's talking about we bring about what we think about. Everything that happens is a result of our thoughts and our actions. We bring all this about. And
I have to tell you, Joel, I mean, you and I were talking just before we even started the show about how my own life has been going lately and how I've had my ups and downs and so forth. And I especially am noticing during the down times, I get really, really frustrated with myself because I can feel myself focusing on negatives. I can see the pattern. I'm stuck in it. I can say to myself, yeah, I'm really stuck in this pattern. And do you know what? I don't move out of it. Do you know how frustrating that is?
Well, and you know, it really is. I mean, it's what destroys the practice of using the law of attraction to our advantage and actually propels us to the other side.
Right.
There's a section here, and the way the book's written, it's there's a lot of quotes by a lot of different people, and we could go through each single one. It's not really even divided into chapters the way most are.
Right.
But there's one that sticks out, and it's on page 25, and I don't even know if it's an official chapter, but it says the secret summaries, and the summary of the secret. The great secret of life is the law of attraction. And this is what you're talking about. The law of attraction says like attracts like. So when you think a thought, you're also attracting like thoughts to you.
That's really key right there. That phrase right there.
Yeah. Thoughts are magnetic. And thoughts have a frequency. And as you think thoughts, they are sent out to the universe, and they magnetically attract all like things that are on the same frequency. Everything sent out returns to the source, you.
And by the way, this is exactly why this is often called woo-woo.
Yes. Well, and we can, you know, and I'll finish this up, and we'll sort of respond. It says, the next one is, you are like a human transmission tower.
Yes. Transmitting
a frequency with your thoughts. If you want to change anything in your life, you must change the frequency by changing your thoughts. The next one, your current thoughts are creating your future life. What you think about the most or focus on the most will appear as your life.
Yes.
Your thoughts become things. Now,
and when it's stated that plainly,
yes,
you really can't miss it. But
right.
I know I remember the first time I read this and heard the concept. I can't remember if I saw the video first or if I read the book first. I think I read the book first. But when I first read that, all I could do was try to rationalize in my mind that, well, it's certainly better to think about what I want than what I don't want, because at least I'll know it and see it. But I was resisting this whole idea of being a magnet and it attracts to me. That part was hard.
Well, and part of what I'm going to say, and I ask that my dear friends, my Southern Baptist friends, please take a moment and go to the bathroom, because I part of what I'm reading here is one of the things that I think was the point of and here's my interpretation of this is God exists within us.
Yes.
We are God.
Yes.
We are part of God. He talks about that. It's you know, the Lord's Supper. You're eating you're representative of Him being within you.
Right.
And I don't want to go much further than that. So when you read this, and especially because a lot of people, when they said, well, I want everything to be, I want to be in tune with the source. Well, everything sent out returns to the source, which is you. In this case, you and you alone are solely responsible for your thoughts. So you and you alone are solely responsible for the life you are created, period. They're full stop, not negotiable.
Yeah,
that's a hard pill to swallow.
That's really tough. And not just for evangelicals. That's a hard pill for anybody to swallow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I battled with that, to be perfectly honest with you, in the very beginning, I'm a huge child advocate, and I've always been, and have fought for the rights of kids and particularly foster care kids for many years. And kids that have been sexually abused, I never could get. I could pretty much swallow that pill until that we got, oh, wait a minute, you're saying these kids invited that. You're saying that, and I get hung up on that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I don't blame you. I mean, that's a hard thing, because that seems to be what it adds up to, doesn't it?
Yes. But what somebody was explaining to me, and this helped a lot. as humans have a lot of vested interest in who is at fault, and that's a negative. You're at fault here. But I like how somebody pointed out, when someone falls off of a skyscraper to their death, it isn't anybody yelling about the gravity force being wrong.
Right.
Gravity did not become evil.
Nope.
But it is gravity's fault. We can agree on that. It's gravity's fault. He died when he hit the ground. I mean, this gravity did that.
And yet, clearly, gravity isn't even a being. So
right.
How could it be at fault?
Right. It's the law of gravity is it. So the law of attraction has that same unemotional attachment to it. What The Secret does for a lot of people, and I will speak for what it did for me. It took away my excuses.
Yes.
It made me shut up and quit whining. And people say, well, you're sounding negative. I don't mean it negative at all. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I realized Joel is solely responsible for his happiness, for his future, and I even found out, as we've shared before, that my perspective can change the past, at least from my perspective.
Absolutely. And that's really very, very important.
Yes.
The thing that also I'd like to remind us all of, The Secret and the teachings of the law of attraction have a really important side message, if you will, that goes along with it that kind of gets lost, but you started to touch on it in a way that often doesn't get touched on. That message is the whole concept of fault is not helpful.
Absolutely.
Not that. Absolutely. I mean, okay, yeah. If you're in the field of law and you're in a courtroom, then fault has to play a role because that's the way courts are set up. Okay, fine. But in terms of the way life works, there's really no room for fault, because what fault is really about is diverting attention away from personal responsibility.
Yes, and that has, and for especially our society today, spends a lot of energy trying to determine fault and levels of fault and alternative fact fault and all kinds of faults that don't make sense, and it's a wasted energy. One of the things I do in my addiction recovery work is I have seen families get stuck for literally an hour or two at a time debating who is at fault in these scenarios or who is it. Right. Remember when you did this? And I try to get them from that place to, your family member has almost died from addiction. They are wanting to get better. Can we please stop trying to bring back all this old stuff? And it's very hard to do.
And by the way, I mean, I want to make sure I make clear my last point, because it ties in directly to what you're talking about here. When I say that the whole point of fault is to divert attention away from personal responsibility, what I do not mean is that means that you are personally at fault, and that's what personal responsibility means. No, that is the opposite of what we're talking about here. Personal responsibility has nothing to do with fault. It has simply to do with saying, okay, this is up to me.
Yes. And at the same time of being almost overwhelming, and I lost the ability to blame others or some other entity or my parents or the society or whoever, and that I instantly had to become responsible for me. But at the same time, it was incredibly freeing to understand I was at the helm,
which you can't do when you're at fault. When you're holding yourself at fault, you can't get to that place.
Yes.
But when you hold yourself responsible without blame being attached to it, then it's an entirely different experience.
Right. Here's another summary page we'll go through, and okay. I like how she does this summary, and we'll sort of address that. But the law of attraction is a law of nature. It is impartial as the law of gravity. Nothing can come into your Nothing can come into your experience unless you summon it through your persistent thoughts. I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
To know what you're thinking ask yourself how you are feeling. Emotions are valuable tools that instantly tell us what we're thinking. It is impossible to feel bad and at the same time have good thoughts.
Try it sometime.
Try it. I use that all the time. Your thoughts determine your frequency, and your feelings tell you immediately what frequency you're on. When you feel bad, you're on the frequency of drawing more bad things. When you feel good, you are powerfully attracting more good things to you. Secret shifters such as pleasant memories, nature, and your favorite music can change your feelings and shift your frequency in an instant. You are a big advocate of comedy for that.
Oh yeah.
The feeling of love is the highest frequency you can emit.
Yes.
The greater the love you feel and emit, the greater the power you're harnessing.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that are hitting home. To me, this is the grand slam, and this is where she has really, really done an excellent job, because the format of the book is you have several of the gurus we're referring to. They go through, they're in these sections where they sort of give their little snippets and opinions, and then she does a summary of what they said as we go. And I think she's done a wonderful job, again, as an entry-level type position, and really hitting home. And I can't imagine when you were first writing this or doing this, I had the advantage that someone else has broken the ground for me. So when I advocate for this, I still am looked at very oddly by many people, and I am one of the few people, and maybe the only one that incorporates it as deeply as I do into addiction work. And other forms of treatment I do, but it's a very, very helpful for me in working with addicts. And I know that in the beginning it's sort of counter intuitive to what the traditional thought process of addiction treatment is, but it's a very effective treatment modality when you use it correctly.
And I'm glad you're mentioning that, because that is not the way most of the therapy world looks at it.
Right.
The way you look at it is really radically different from the way that most do it. And yet, among the therapeutic community who know who you are, it's becoming increasingly impossible for them to deny the reality of what you're producing.
Yes.
You're producing amazing results.
Well, and I've recently taken over director of a new addiction treatment facility here in Virginia. And I'm working with incredible professionals that I've worked with in the past. And when I first started doing this, I had a really hard sell on trying to get this incorporated into my program. I am now asked to train the staff in this method. I'm asked to train the doctors in this method. It is really something that they have seen the result from. And our patients are loving it because they're hearing something different, not just our traditional addiction patients, but it's also their families that are looking differently at their addict now. It's always been such a negative lens that they looked at their loved one through, because that's what the picture was painted. When they look at their loved one through a loving, positive type lens, it's amazing the difference they feel as well.
Yes. The way that you look at others does influence others positively or negatively. So if you choose to take a negative perspective, you are going to continue to encourage them to pursue a negative path. When you take a positive perspective, you encourage them to take a positive path. Notice that we're not saying that you cause them to take a negative or a positive path. What we're saying is you influence them, because ultimately they are their own law of attractions. They are doing their own attracting. But what you're providing is example. What you're providing is opportunity to see a way to do something. And it doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be a therapist. Just by being positive, by expressing a positive viewpoint, by taking negatives and turning them around into positives, finding silver linings with people who you've had trouble with in the past, just by changing your own attitude that way, you do influence others. And it shows up in amazing ways.
Well, and that last week I was doing a group, and there's a young lady. She has had just an unbelievable list of things that have happened to her, and she describes each one in detail, in great detail, of the trauma attached, and very descriptive, to a point that she is owning the trauma. She has been in therapy for 25 years, has not gotten any better, in fact, gotten worse, and she has developed an alcohol problem. And the idea, when I first lightly told her, she said, I am, and her statement at the end of her sharing in group was, she said, I am horribly cursed. Mm. And I said, yes, you are.
Which was not what she expected to hear at all.
No, she said, well, you think so? And I go, I know so. You are, there's no doubt you're cursed. And again, I walked her through the whole concept. I said, because you think you're cursed. I said, everything you're believing has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you keep bringing more of that on. And she did not like where that was going. She said,
I did because now you can't blame the curse anymore. There's that blame word again.
Right. And you know, she didn't like it, but afterwards she set up individual sessions with me to discuss it further. She said, of all the things I've heard, she said, it turns my stomach because it's hitting home. She said, what if I am the author of all of this? And I go, boy, I said, you are. I said, you just wait till you figure it out. I said, you've held your own key for a long time. You just haven't realized it. And we're working, and it's an interesting thing, Walt.
It's interesting, and I can identify with it because I remember many of my own steps along this path to law of attraction enlightenment, which I'm still on. One of the early ones I remember is my wife coming to me at one point very early on and basically confronting me, saying that I was always thinking negatively. I was always reacting negatively. And Joel, I didn't know I was doing it.
Of course not. You wouldn't do it if you'd realized it.
I had no idea. I really thought I was a fairly positive person. It wasn't until I started paying attention that I realized everything that came out of my mouth was negative.
Yes.
Holy cow.
By default, without processing, it just was negative. It because of life happening the way it's happened, we become that person that is anticipating the negative. You didn't set out to be negative.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the last thing I had in mind.
Yeah, but you were responding that in the way that it is happening. You're responding the way that you've always done it, and so it's negative, and that negativity is creating that the stuff that, as she mentioned, the stuff that we think the most about is what the frequency we're vibrating on. And if you're viewing your world as lacking, whether it's money, relationships, whatever, if you're viewing that as lack, you have no option but to attract additional lack.
That's right.
That's a very important point. And I see it all the time. I watched it with me. I have, many times when my thoughts were, I was desperate for money, and money was this big event, and I'm in a situation right now, and I'm very, very pleased to have the life that I have right now, but it's not even a thing anymore. I'm pursuing careers I love. I'm being compensated well. I know that I'm going to be provided for. I by myself, by my work, by the universe, by what I'm putting out there. It's not even an event anymore. That's not a concern. Money is not a concern.
I'll tell you something. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking back to my own experience of realizing that everything coming out of my mouth was negative. One of the ways that I realized fairly early that I was doing that was a learned way. They were all learned ways, of course, but this is one that came to mind. I had learned very early on how to be very effectively sarcastic. I was really good at sarcasm. I still am. I'm very good at it. What I did not realize is just how easily sarcasm leads you on the path to negativity.
Yes.
Because that's the nature of sarcasm. It's the backhanded compliment.
It is. It is. And one of the tools that I have a very sarcastic sense of humor, and I have to, and I still use my sarcasm, but it's always done with people that are at great understanding that Joel's using it. I say the word really like 50 times a day. So,
and always with that inflection, right?
Yeah, it's like, really? I mean, really? It's done. But it is, when you get lost in the sarcasm.
Yes.
It can become a very, very dark tool. And if you look at it that way, it does attract negative. And when you become skeptical and not believing, and I one of the things that I talk about often in my list of things to do, I tell you every week I try to fail at least once a day. That's one of the things I do. I like to be awed once a day. I'd love to say, wow.
That's a nice goal. I like that.
Every day. I like to learn something. Sometimes I never knew, this is a stupid one, but I love it. Cows have no upper teeth.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
They have this really hard, gum-like thing that they chew. Okay. Now, first of all, hopefully our audience learned something today. But when I heard that, I said, wow, that's awesome. Now, it's irrelevant and it doesn't mean anything, but it's wow. I like to learn. I like to find out new things. I love to say wow, and I think that's a great state of mind. So learning, acquiring new knowledge, being in awe of things. The universe is amazing. You get to see things that when you're looking for stuff to be awed by, you'd be shocked at the stuff there that it will put you in a state of awe.
I imagine that. In fact, as you're saying that, I'm realizing I have something somewhat similar that I like to do every day. For me, it's not trying to find an awe. For me, it's trying to find a
yeah.
It's a release, a relief, a release of stress. If I can find a new way to release stress every day, I feel like it's a victorious day. I mean, today, for instance, as we're recording this for Thursday's show, by the time Thursday's show comes along, anyone who follows women's collegiate basketball will know that UConn has won their 112th straight game, which is amazing all by itself, and they're now in the Final Four. And if you saw the game that they played, which I watched tonight as we're recording this, it was just beautiful basketball, Joel. I mean, it was basketball the way it's supposed to be played. It was like watching choreographed dance. It was so good. And at the end of that game, now I actually didn't even see the whole game. I missed the first part, which is actually the best part. The first quarter, apparently, where they just blew the other team out of the water, was their best part of the game. But the part that I did see, it just lifted me up. It was like, oh, wow, that is so good. That is so well played. And just by watching that, I felt stress like flowing off of me. That's what happens every time I get an moment.
And that's taking advantage of. It can take place anywhere. It can, one of my epiphanies that I shared in the past is one of my aha awakening moments that you'll never suspect is when after all my chaos and my addiction, and I was arrested and I was placed in jail, and when the door shut, I went, oh.
It sounds so weird to say that, but I understand what you mean.
It finally can be over. I remember saying that. It finally can be over. I no longer have to do this. It's finally done. Now, I have no idea what's about to happen to me, but what has been happening hasn't worked, so it ain't going to be any worse than that. And it was, and I was shocked by the feeling.
Yeah.
But that I found serenity in the release or the surrender of like, I can take a nap now. I'm no longer there. And today I as I mentioned earlier in our show, I started as director of a new facility with some great colleagues, and at the same time, I'm trying to take my private practice and make it more manageable and sort of go more part-time on private practice. And I'm having some very long days. And plus I have my amazing foster son with me. So, I have a life outside of work. And so it could easily be overwhelming if I allowed it to be.
Sure.
But today, as I was going, and after I left job one, my new job, and I had to run and meet someone and one of my strategies, especially with my younger clients, is I actually work them out before I do sessions with them. So we do a 20, 30-minute workout, then we do a 45-minute session.
Wow.
And it's an amazing tool to get their minds open to talk, and it's a great thing. So I had to get in my gym clothes to go meet this young man. And I can remember that feeling that stress for a moment. And I immediately was able to take a deep breath and say, I have the most amazing life I could possibly imagine. I'm doing what I love. I have plenty of money. I have incredible health. There is not a thing in the world that I even want anymore. I have everything. Why am I stressed? And the stress just went away. It just went away. And
that's a sign of a lot of practice of doing exactly that thing.
Yes. And as I had to, we record, we're sort of been all over the place lately, and we're trying to get back into a steady time slot. But we I had to email you and say, look, I'm not going to be able to do this until later. And so after that, basically putting in a 14-hour day, we did the radio show this evening. But I have tons of energy. I'm able to do this, and I'm excited because I didn't spend a day at work today at all. I got the privilege of doing what I love today,
which is everything, because that's how you get that's how you get that vortex going that Abraham Hicks talks about, putting the law of attraction to work on your side to your benefit. Because when you're in that zone, in that vortex where you're focused so well on what you love, and you're blocking out the stuff you don't like, and you're just focusing, and it's all stuff that you love, then the law of attraction promises you're going to get more stuff like it, and that's what happens. Yeah. That's exactly what you're experiencing right now.
Absolutely, and at this moment in my life where everything is converged to right now, I can think of no greater time in my life than right now. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's all coming together. Now, the other side of it, I have a lot of work to do, and I can get focused on that, or I can look at these things, but I'm doing what I love, so it isn't a burden. I want to get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm going to do it all again tomorrow. And I'm going to do it, and it's going to get in a nice. And I will do self-care, and I will take care of myself. I still got to work out in today with one of my clients, so I still am feeling good. But what I'm hoping our audience can hear, or at least see in themselves, once you sort of buy into this practice, it really becomes just so enlightening, and it isn't just about attracting wealth. It's attracting just that serenity mindset, that wonderful feeling of fulfillment. The frequency that I can vibrate on has no option but to attract more of this.
Yes. And as one person who is probably like a lot of audience members who is not in that vortex right now, because I go through my ups and my downs lately have been pretty tough, yet I still know that this concept works. So even though I find myself at times feeling like, okay, I don't feel very good right now, I know I should be changing my mindset. Why am I not changing my mindset? I just seem to be stuck here. Like, okay, change the mindset. Why am I still here? Why am I still here? I go through that a lot. That doesn't mean I don't understand how to get to the other side.
Right.
I do understand, but it's more than just understanding. It's being willing to take the risk right now and change my mindset. And that's where the battle takes place, and that's also where the solution takes place. Because every time that I do successfully convince myself to, in that moment, find a way to change the mindset, I always feel better. What I haven't learned yet, Joel, is to remember that every time that I'm stuck.
Yes.
I'm getting closer to it. I'm getting better at it, but I still don't always remember that every time I change the mindset, I always feel better. If I can remember that, I think I'm going to finally get there.
And that is so relevant to that next level stuff. When, you know, I've often said that, you know, when we first started doing this together, I'm still in kindergarten with the law of attraction. I do think I'm in like 4th or 5th grade now. I really do. And maybe even middle school by now. But the understanding of it all, as I grasp, I see even more clearly how powerful this is. I don't think as a human being I can ever appreciate the incredible power that does exist, because it is there. It is the point. But I have become so much more effective at tuning in with it and using it in such a way to remind myself, to force myself into a state of happiness. And from that, I generate everything. I generate from, you know, with the state of gratitude, of happiness, of love, and you put it out there, and the feedback then, if anything's different, the feedback is almost immediate now.
That's nice.
It really is.
Because that's the hard part when you're in the bad place.
Yes.
You don't see it. You don't feel it. It doesn't seem immediate, so it doesn't feel like it's happening.
You'll love this one. I'm sorry, I just thought of this.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that I do that is awful weird is I blend. Every day I have a blend of vegetables. I'll do green, you know, like spinach and you know, kale and carrots and beets and stuff, and a little bit of fruit, and I'll blend it up, put a little whey protein in there, and I have one of those every day. And I try to eat a beet every day, blended up, and they really don't have much taste. But if you ever blended up a beet, it dominates the color. It is incredibly dense in color. It's this deep red that's all, you know, crimson, very deep. And the other day, I have a Vitamix blender, which is the ultimate blender. It blends anything. You can blend spoons into water, I believe. It's incredibly powerful.
We don't recommend that, by the way.
Don't recommend it, but if you need spoons into water, try it. And so I had done my blend, and I was having one of those days. I'm sort of rushing around trying to get this done. Had a lot of stuff I had to get done. Had a lot of case notes I had to do that evening. And I spilt the entire pitcher of beet juice and went all over my floor.
Oh, my.
The initial out of my thought process was, oh, and I immediately just laughed.
Good for you.
And just laughed at it. And I have one of the things I keep is, you know, I wear a lot of T-shirts, like I wear dress shirts a lot, and I always have to wear a T-shirt underneath them. Well, T-shirt's yellow, and so I'm always buying new T-shirts. So I keep a pile of just rag T-shirts for years. So I immediately went and got a bunch of T-shirts, threw it on the concoction on the floor, cleaned it up, and it took me probably 10 or 15 minutes to get it really up and cleaned up.
Yeah, especially with a whole container like that. Wow.
Yeah, a whole container, and of course it gets in the. I have hardwood floors, so I'm having to
get
the.
Oh, great!
Crevices,
yeah.
You know? So I laughed, and because I'm looking, and my thought process after I was done, I said, why did I laugh? And the laugh wasn't because it was funny. I felt that instant anger, and I have conditioned myself so quickly to stop that, to not allow the negative into my world. And then I'm able, once I'm looking at it, at the end of the day, I'm talking about me cleaning up a mess. It's the world doesn't come to an end. I didn't lose a family member. My house didn't burn down. My car didn't wreck. I simply spilt something. And in the big scheme of my life, I'm never going to allow that to destroy my world. So the concept that I'm trying to point out is instantly, without even thinking, I block my anger with a laugh.
And by the way, there is a humorous aspect to that. The humorous aspect is that on either a conscious or a subconscious level, you realized you could have reacted entirely differently. And
yes.
you didn't do it. Like,
right.
I beat that one.
Yeah. And I as I was processing it afterwards, I can remember that I was just cleaning it up. And again, I wasn't angry cleaning it up, and I actually thought how clever I was to save all those old T-shirts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and I'm like, well, I have like 30 T-shirts. I can clean it, and it worked perfectly. I mean, my goodness, what a brilliant cleanup tool. And with all that being said, Walt, it was just walking through that moment, and when you can get there, when you can have these built. It used to be I had anything I was conditioned the other way.
Right.
I'm trying to do everything right. Look how this screwed up. Oh my, I could do that back in the old days. And in reality, I spilt something on my floor. I have the most incredible life of anybody I know going on right now, and there's no way spilling something on my floor should mean anything. In a worst case scenario, I'll rip it out and put in a new floor. No big deal.
And that's a tremendous achievement, by the way, to that quickly stop, turn around in your mind, and dismiss any negative reaction. That is an achievement. That's a huge achievement.
Well, that's how I'm doing some research with somebody to put this in more quantifiable terms. But, the idea that the area of the brain that controls breathing and your heartbeat and sort of the primitive or the reptilian brain, they call it. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of activity back there, to change thought patterns, you have to reprogram that part of the brain, which is so difficult to do. Mm. I believe that I have effectively reprogrammed a very, very hardwired piece of my brain that would always respond negatively. I've stopped that. Now, did I reprogram it back there or somewhere else in the process? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I have reprogrammed it where that response goes in a different way. Mm.
And that's it, making it a very different way. Because when it's a different way, now all of a sudden it has a different flavor. It has a different feel to it. And when the feeling is different, all of a sudden the old patterns start to slip away. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the old negative patterns to slip away. That's why it's such a big victory to have that stop, shift thought process that goes on in like a half a second.
Right. And that's what they're saying. If you've been doing things in your world and you have the world or the life you want, keep doing those things because that's what you're bringing. If it isn't what you want, why are you keeping on doing the same things? It's just how that works. And same with our thought processes. The redundant thinking patterns that keep bringing us the same things have to be changed. And it's not about anybody else. You got to take anybody else out of the equation. This is you and you alone. You are responsible for your life that you are creating. You are your own God in that sense.
By the way, Rhonda includes a story of her own in this first chapter that really explains very nicely in a nutshell how this process works. She uses a presentation by one of her presenters, a guy named Bill Harris. He's a teacher. He founded a place called the Centerpoint Research Institute. He shares a story of a former student of his who was taking a special course where he got email access to the teacher. And I guess the student's name was Robert. Robert was a gay man who was constantly harassed from his coworkers for being gay. And Robert dealt with the stress by complaining to his teacher, who encouraged him to focus instead on his passion of being a stand-up comedian and taking his mind off of all that other stuff. I mean, this is the short version. The longer version's in the book. But the gist of it is this. The moment that Robert stopped thinking of himself as a victimized gay man is the moment that he stopped being victimized as a gay man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's an amazing thing, but it's also an explanation of how you change your thought process in order to change your experience. And when you get that you can do that, and that you don't have to fall into those old patterns anymore of expecting that, you're a gay man, so you're going to walk down the street and somebody's going to try to trip you, you're going to be harassed, and they're going to dump stuff on your head, and there's all this other stuff. When you stop thinking of that, all of a sudden it all just goes away, which is remarkable.
It really is. It really, truly is. And that's I credit the book, The Secret, for really taking me to a level to understand this. This is an incredible tool. And as I said, I don't know how many I've actually given out. I've bought them over several places over the years. The one used bookstore that I buy from, I have bought over 2,000 copies.
You're their favorite customer.
Yeah, and I've actually bought from others. So I mean, but I give this out. I've given it to cashiers. I stopped in the street and gave it to a homeless man one time. He said, "Can you help me out?" And I go, "I certainly can." Now he probably burned it for firewood. I don't know, but yeah, I put it out there. I don't know if he took it or not, but it is the answer.
It's the answer to a lot of people's questions. Questions about,
yes.
How do I get past this X that I'm stuck in?
Yes.
It almost doesn't matter what the X is.
Once you realize it doesn't matter at all. And it's like the lady that I was talking about in group when we first started, who was the author of her own life, which has become it is literally just a one hospital stay after another, and gastric bypass 4 times, multiple things, and when I say this, there's people that say, "Well, Joel, you don't have any empathy for a situation." That's not the case at all. I have great empathy, but not for what people think. I have empathy, or I have sympathy, actually, that she keeps bringing all this about and doesn't realize she has the key to stop it.
Yes. That's the one thing that it's why The Secret seems so repetitive, because that's the story told over and over and over again in 1,000 different stories. Well, not in the book, but I mean here on our show and other people talking and so forth. Thousands of different stories that all have the same basic theme: doubt.
Yes. Doubt, absolutely, and that as we move forward with my growth and your growth, that doubt, or that charging effect, what frequency are you on? If your frequency of doubt, you'll have more things to doubt. If it's frequency of confidence, of you have, there's no problem. It's stuff you don't worry about. There was a time where I worried about, I don't think I worry any more than I think. I can't come up with anything I ever worry about anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm asking myself, do I really want to stay in a place where all I'm doing is focusing on these bad things that are going on? I doubt it.
You're right. Oh, well, it's such a great, again, this is very valuable to me. I really feel that one day, when it's the right time, this message that we bring is a unique look, and it's sort of bringing all these people together in a way that I don't know anyone else doing it. All these thoughts together.
Yeah, I think we're kind of unique in that sense. So by all means, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. You can do that at our website, lo8today.net. Of course, you can continue to listen to us here on PRN, if that's where you found us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. Wherever you find us, just make sure you subscribe. And again, the easiest way to subscribe is through lo8today.net or through the iTunes store, the App Store. You can find us there too, and you can subscribe there. But make sure that you're following us, because like our adventure following Napoleon Hill's book, this one's going to be even more adventurous, because we're going to be looking into this whole thing every single week in greater and greater depth as we go through chapter after chapter. And while it's not as long as Napoleon Hill's book, it's got a lot of cool stuff, and we're going to be covering it all. Joel, I mean, this is going to be fun.
I really, again, this is life-changing for me, this book, and the fact we get to dissect it, so to speak, is exciting. It's exciting.
It's fun, and it's good for us.
Yes.
I mean, you and I talk about it a lot, how much it helps us in our own lives. We want to transmit the same thing to our listeners, so that's why we keep inviting people to come and listen and keep coming back, because this is a great adventure, and
it is.
And we're all a part of it.
Absolutely, Walt.
So be sure to join us next week. Find us whatever way that you can find us. Subscribe if you can, and keep following on. Get your copy of The Secret. You can write to Joel if you need to get a copy, but it's also available almost everywhere. And Joel, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Walt, great to talk to you this evening.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.